Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box, have been popping up a lot of videos online, and the mainstream media outlets are even talking about the possibility that Senator Mike Gravel, the former Democratic senator from Alaska, will be entering the presidential election. He will be trying to compete as a Democrat in the presidential primary against a host of other candidates. Who really is Mike Gravel and what is he all about? Well, a lot of people were interested in Nate Jackson, and really, of course, the Democratic primary as well, as he was going up against other people such as Hillary Clinton, Dennis Kucinich, and some other guy named Barack Obama. This was quite a while ago, actually. I was a freshman in, and I only ever took one political science class in college. And I was, a freshman, and they talked about the upcoming candidates that were going to be competing, as Democrats and Republicans. And there was a certain one, Mike Gravel, that stood out to me. And I was like, that's the guy I want to know more about. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is kind of going back to many things that he said on the campaign trail back in 2007, 2008, as well as hopefully kind of some things that have changed over the course of the last couple years. First, I am very surprised that I thought Mike Gravel would even attempt to try and get back into the political mix because at age 88, born in 1930, that's an ambitious move. And openly, Gravel even said on Twitter that he's not even intending to win the thing. It's about bringing some ideas forward, and it's about raising awareness of certain things. Mike Gravel is someone who is really captivating. He has kind of a different perspective on things. Not only is he somewhat of a Democrat, but he's also somewhat of a libertarian. And if I recall correctly, after he dropped out of the Democratic primary in 2007, 2008, around that time, he tried to go for the Libertarian nomination. But one of the things that I just really remember this because I was so surprised to see someone who had sort of the Democratic left wing libertarian perspective. And that was one of the first times that I ever heard of someone like that. And that really showed me that politics isn't just this left versus right dynamic. It's almost like, sometimes it's like coming full circle and they're just kind of different parts of the circle that people are in. But let's talk about some policies Bell has because he is very, very citizen centered. He wrote a whole book about this called Citizen Power. And even if you can't, even if you aren't able to buy the book now, Citizen Power, he's done a lot of interviews, speeches, presentations, talking about the ideas in this book. Mike Gravel is all about ideas. Now, Bernie Sanders, one of the potential competitors for Gravel, said something very when he's talking about democratic socialism. What Bernie Sanders said was that democratic socialism should be that people who are in the government that well the remainder of the citizens. It's like he's the kind of guy who puts forward these. When you vote, you should vote with a paper ballot at your polling place, and then you go back home and you should check on the internet and you put in your name, district, and birth date. And as long as there isn't any other John Q. Smith in your district who has the exact same birthday as you can see if your vote was cast properly, because that would sort of give people a chance to kind of really see are their votes being counted correctly. And that's a big thing. Another thing that Mike Gravel talked about, and I'm going off of memory here, so I hope that I can get all this right. He talked about having citizens voting on constitutional amendments, direct democracy for the constitutional amendments. We have 27 amendments, and never once was it ever done by direct democracy where people are voting in a referendum style fashion. Do you agree with Amendment 28? Yes or no? Do you want Amendment 28? Yes or no? You can have a referendum, Look at what's happened in the UK over the last couple of years. Not only Brexit, but also the referendum on Scottish independence, 86% voter turnout. You can have a referendum at a national level, of course, right? Switzerland does it all the time. I was talking about this with somebody on Twitter once, and they were saying that they were opposed to this type of idea, where it was like what these sort of other places aren't really having that we have is the Supreme Court. They're like, if California is any example of this direct democracy stuff, then it's not a good example for the nation because the Supreme Court would just overrule whatever sort of thing that we kind of would turn out in sort of our direct democracy on a constitutional amendment. Like, for example, we oppose Amendment 28, and the majority of people, 51% of Americans vote against Amendment 28, then it can go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could override them. And I'm not sure what to say about that. I'm not sure. So I would ask the question to anybody who would hear this little far off corner of YouTube. What do you think about that? Should the United States electorate, registered voters, vote on constitutional amendments in a yes or no referendum style fashion? What do you think about that? And I do have to say that came to me from Senator Mike Gravel. That was one of his ideas. He's really kind of like an idea powerhouse kind of guy. Lots of new things. But one of the big things is we don't have to endorse everything. We can just kind of talk about it. Do you think it's a good idea? But I would say him more so than many other candidates from 2008, and definitely more than many other candidates from 2019. He's actually wanting the citizens to be involved with government, citizens making the decisions. If you think that Cory Booker wants the citizens to be involved with government, no, absolutely not. He has just taken more money from the pharmaceutical industry than any other person in both houses of Congress, if I recall correctly. So it's like it would be nice to just kind of hear the refreshing voice of someone who is actually promoting ideas that would benefit the electorate, the voters, the ordinary citizens like you and me. I mean, I was about to say like you and me, but I'm like, I don't know how ordinary you are. Maybe you're some type of kind of billionaire or something like that. Maybe you're Elon Musk who's listening to this. I don't know who you are, but I'm ordinary. I'm a very ordinary guy. So what else do we have though when it comes to Mike Gravel? He has had some of the boldest statements on drugs that I've heard. And it's quite different than some of the other libertarian ideas out there. Yeah, libertarians are like, oh, legalization, this, let's just decriminalize that. What I heard from Mike Gravel was, of course, marijuana. He is completely in favor of that. After he dropped out of the presidential elections in 2008, he actually went on to kind of work with legal marijuana. I mean, like in a commercial level, business level, he's all about legalizing marijuana. But he said something that was quite bold when it came to things like cocaine, crack, heroin, crystal meth. He was like, it should be legal for someone if they have a prescription from a doctor. Doctors, should be able to prescribe the stuff. What on earth is that talking about? Well, people deal in rehab, going through withdrawal. I mean, like if you had a prescription from a possess meth and heroin, very, very bold statement. And I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what he said. So, what do you think about something like that? And it's kind of just like, I mean, once again, dealing with addicts, with people going through withdrawal, and you're sort of treating people who have problems with addiction as opposed to criminals. That is something that is very libertarian, all up and down the spectrum. Whether it's people like Ron Paul, whether it's people like Jesse Ventura, who are is on the independent side of the libertarians. Very bold statement, all the same. Now, a big thing we need to notice is that Mike Gravel is 88 years old. I mean, that's quite shocking that he would even want to go through some of the things about talk about running for president, but a fight left in him, and he really wants to raise awareness of certain ideas. I would be quite curious what people do think. How old is too old to be president? I mean, because before Mike Gravel, age 88, People were talking about this with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, and they're also talking about it with people like Nancy Pelosi, who's 78 years old herself. And we're not even talking about being president at that point, they're just talking about being at the kind of epitome of leadership in Congress or your party. The Speaker of the House, of course, is Nancy Pelosi. So it's like they're just kind of talking about being at that level. Do you think that there should be any age limit, or do you think there should be like, if someone has the sort of capabilities to carry out the job, then they should just continue? I'm just asking the question right there. That's something that I'd never really put too much precise thought in about how you would sort of limit that stuff. But when we want to talk about Mike Gravel, once again, very bold stances on drugs, as well as even some other things. He's all about universal health care. And he's one of the few people that I heard on the debate stage say something where he was like, they asked him about spirituality, and he said, I believe in love. This is something where it's going to be kind of expanding toward just a new way of thinking where politicians are going to be trying to break from the same mold. People were commending Bernie Sanders for talking about being culturally Jewish versus spiritually Jewish, and like they're just sort of thinking that they can kind of represent what they genuinely believe, and we're going to kind of get to a more honest level of what the politicians are trying to represent. And people like Mike Gravel are in the exact place to do that. Marianne Williamson is in the exact place to do that. Andrew Yang is in the exact place to do that, to try and represent ideas that they genuinely do believe, and they don't have to sugarcoat it or water it down or try and misrepresent themselves to the public.